Day one of the winter meetings is now in the books, and I'm getting worried the Rangers again are going to let the excuse of TV money let them lose on yet another World Series hero.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers, the first and best daily Rangers podcast. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, on today's show, we're getting into the Rangers meeting with Max Fried and Nathan Eovaldi. Why I think it's just a very convenient excuse, the Rangers using that TV deal as a way to not pay what they should be paying for players, and maybe the Rangers being trade partners with the Cubs. Before we get into any of that, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, yesterday was the first day of the winter meetings with the Juan Soto domino. Following, I talked about what that should mean for these next couple of days of the winter meetings. Talked about that on yesterday's show, but alas, it didn't really go down like that. I've been expecting some big deals to be happening, some big trades, some big moves, some big something. And right now, in the first 24-ish hours of the winter meetings, there's been a whole bunch of big nothing. Unfortunately, there have been some credible rumblings. My favorite kind of rumblings in his column last night for the Dallas Morning News, Evan Grant wrote about the Rangers needing to make a decision on Nathan Eovaldi. There's a lot of good stuff in his column. You should go read it in full. But one of the big takeaways that I had from it is that it feels a lot like the Jordan Montgomery situation. And that the Rangers are sitting there crying poor, thinking, oh no, we don't know how much we're going to make in the TV money, so therefore we can't bring back our World Series hero. We can't bring back this guy who we very much need for the next season, who very much could fit exactly what we're looking for, a guy who fits the culture, a guy who is beloved by the fan base, a World Series hero, and it's a little bit too expensive, so we're just going to go ahead and not do it. Now, I don't think Nathan Eovaldi is going to have a massive fall-off like Jordan Montgomery, where a year later we're sitting there thinking, oh, wow, what a dodged bullet that the Rangers didn't do that. I am still very much of the opinion that if Jordan Montgomery signed during the winter meetings, or heck, even during the winter, not in the spring, a week before the season, Montgomery's season would look very, very different in 2024 than the bad season that he actually ended up having because of the truncated spring training and all of that stuff. But one of the things that really frustrates me about how the Rangers operated last year after the World Series, and talking about how they're possibly operating this year, is the messaging of, the Rangers, the way that they're portraying it, the way that Evan Grant is talking about it, which is by extension usually how the Rangers would prefer people talk about it and view their financial capabilities. The way that I am getting this messaging and the way it's coming off is that because the Rangers don't know exactly how much they're going to make from their new TV deal, they are acting like they are going to make absolutely nothing, which is garbage, which is absolute garbage. I get the uncertainty. I get not wanting to do 6, 7, 8-year deals while you're still murky on exactly what the TV revenue is going to look like in this new structure with the new RSN they've been working on creating, which they said they were making progress on Saturday, but Evan Grant said don't expect an announcement about a new deal being done, knowing exactly what's going on during these winter meetings. And it's just so incredibly frustrating that the Rangers are acting like this. I mean, last year they were acting like Bally was going to give them absolutely nothing. Like, oh my gosh, we're so poor. We're so poor. We can't possibly afford a Jordan Montgomery. Oh dear Lord, no. Oh, absolutely not. We can't afford, anyone at the top tier of the market. There's no way we could fathom that. We're going to make so much less money than what Bally is going to give us. And last year, you know how much less the Rangers got from Bally than they were expecting? $15 million. $15 million less than what they had anticipated. That's the cost of a John Gray year. One John Gray year. And you think they didn't make at least $15 million from that World Series run? From the tickets to all those home games? Heck, I think 4 games of home games in the playoffs, which the Rangers didn't win a whole lot of those home playoff games, but they had them. They sure as shoot had them. Those tickets were outrageously expensive, and I guarantee you 3-4 playoff games at home could pay for $15 million, let alone what all they did with the World Series ticket revenue, let alone what they did with all the revenue from actually winning the World Series, which they get from Major League Baseball, let alone the millions I'm sure they made in all of us buying merch from the championship, like this pennant right here, like this World Series trophy right here that I'm holding. Like, I'm sure the bazillion things that each of you bought when the Rangers won it all, because we were so dang happy. Our wallets said, no, please stop spending. We don't have this much money. But our hearts said, the Rangers just won it all. I am going to bankrupt myself with championship merch. You think they didn't get at least $15 million from that, let alone more? I get that there's some uncertainty. I get wanting to be fiscally responsible. I hate it. I think it's annoying. I think it's a lot of times used as a cop-out, but I get it. But acting like you're going to make absolutely nothing from this TV deal, which they have leaked out information that they think they're going to make more than they would have with Bally / FanDuel / whatever the heck Diamond Sports is calling that, formerly known as Fox Sports Southwest. They're going to make more money with this local TV deal. Yeah, there's going to be some startup costs, but they're going to make plenty of money. Maybe it's not going to be $111 million per year like the agreement they signed with Fox Sports Southwest back in 2010 or 11 or whenever it actually was. But there's still going to be plenty of money to be made. And also there's going to be some more money from streaming things from other different revenue sources. There's still plenty of ticket revenue that is going to be made. There is still more championship merch that is going to be sold the years and years to come from that one championship, let alone if there are more championships, let alone if there are more home playoff games to get that revenue in. But all of this crying poor, all of this crying, I don't know exactly what we're going to do, just has me incredibly frustrated with Ray Davis and this ownership group. The Rangers fans invested heavily in 2023 throughout that World Series run, and because it wasn't rewarded, it feels like a lot of the momentum is being lost. Now, the talk about it and the reality of what the payroll was this past year, it's different. Because even though the Rangers were in the luxury tax this year, it still felt like they were crying poor. It still felt like every single dollar spent had to be the most best used dollar that the Rangers could possibly spend. And while I don't think the Rangers are going to go into luxury tax again this year, the fact that there is talk about them being not just not in the luxury tax, but well below it. The end here of Evan talking about, but if the number is more in the arbitrary figure of 210 or 220 million, flexibility is much more limited. But if they go anything below the luxury tax level, which is 241 million, or as he says here, 240, they could have as much as $50 million to work with this offseason, which I think they could and should. And I think it might end up being closer to 55 million. But as long as they're close to that luxury tax, that's where this team should be. That's where they should be playing. This is a top 5 media market in the country. This is a team that just won a World Series championship. This is a team that has multiple superstars in their prime that are being paid like superstars that you convinced to sign here because you would be competing for championships, plural. Not just making a one-year miracle run and then stinking it up for the rest of these guys' tenure in DeGrom and Seager and Simeon. No, you've got to be committed to still winning, to still spending, whether you don't have to spend like Steve Cohen to be competitive. Not everybody has to go sign a Juan Soto to a 15-year, $765 million deal. You don't have to do that. But you do have to spend at least commensurate to what your market is. The Rangers shouldn't ever be in the bottom half of teams in terms of payroll. They should never be back there like they were for many years under this Ray Davis ownership tenure. They should never be there. They are too big a market. They are too good a team. They have too good a GM to be spending like they're the frickin' A's or the Pirates or, well, maybe not even those teams. Maybe like the Twins or, I don't know, maybe the Brewers or the Blue Jays, maybe even. They should not be anywhere below the top 10 in payroll. And if the whole goal is just financial flexibility for 2025, that is just such a massive disservice. If you have a healthy Jacob deGrom year and you're focusing that year on financial flexibility, you should not be owning a baseball team. You definitely shouldn't be owning the Texas Rangers. Coming up, we're going to look at how this team is going to operate, how Chris Young is saying they're going to operate, and a couple of players that they're meeting with that I think would be absolute perfect fits. Right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app has got so many different odds, including 2025 World Series odds. There's been some movement. Right now, the Mets somehow went below the Yankees. I don't know how that happened right after the Juan Soto signing. They were ahead of the Yankees. Now they've moved down to the 4th best odds. Somehow the Rangers have moved to the 15th, tied for 14th best odds. They're tied with the Cubs at plus 3,300. Somehow the Rays jumped ahead of the Rangers. I don't know how, even though they were the ones who traded away Jose Siri. Actually, the Rangers are also tied with the Tigers. So Tigers, Cubs, and Rangers all plus 3,300 at the 14th best odds to win the 2025 World Series title. That seems like pretty decent odds for the Rangers. So go check out all those odds, FanDuel.com, to join the day. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now, among free agents, it seems like Nathan Eovaldi is going to be the Rangers' top priority, more so than any other actual MLB free agent. There's of course Roki Sasaki, who I think will be more of a priority, but again, it's a whole different situation, a whole different pool of dollars to pull from versus Eovaldi. But the Rangers have met with him, according to sources from the Dallas Morning News. Also, there have been reports that they have been talking basically in contact since the end of the season. This is a deal that the Rangers want to get done. I've sensed that there is definitely some interest from Eovaldi in coming back to Texas. He won a World Series here. He is absolutely beloved here. Bochy loves him. Teammates love him. Fan base loves him. He is from Texas, so it makes sense for a return coming there. But in terms of what the Rangers can do in terms of their spending, there's this quote in Evan Grant's story from last night from Chris Young talking about what the Rangers' spending capability is going to be this offseason. He said, quote, "We are proceeding as though we can operate in normal fashion that will allow us to complete the roster that we think is capable of competing for the division and hopefully a World Series championship. We are engaged on a number of levels with teams and agents. Our goal is to find the right players to help us win. We feel like we are going to be able to do that," end quote. Now, that's a very reassuring quote from Chris Young, who I generally trust most of the statements that he's putting out to be, true. These are actually things that he is trying to do. I feel like he's not one of those GMs Pobos now that will, just say things for the sake of saying things. Usually when he's talked big talk, he's done it. I mean, he has been an aggressive GM and hopefully will be an aggressive president of baseball operations, or POBO for short, during his tenure with the Texas Rangers, which hopefully will extend in perpetuity till the end of time. Or if things start to go badly, then maybe the Rangers make a decision. But this is a guy who has earned the benefit of the doubt, and him talking about how we're going to act like normal this winter, that is a reassuring sign. That is an assuring sign that, okay, maybe Ray actually did hate missing the playoffs. Maybe he did really hate not being competitive this season. Maybe he realized, oh, okay, maybe I should have poured a little bit more into this team as the reigning World Series champs and get back that momentum of winning the fan base over, winning this market over that he lost with the 2024 season. Because there was a lot of lost momentum. If the Rangers headed into 2024, they had a winning record, if they even made the playoffs, even if they lost in the wild card round, if the Rangers just had a winning record and made the playoffs, had a streak of making the playoffs like they did from 2010 to 2012, heck, 2013-ish if you count game 162, having that momentum of making the playoffs basically every year from 2010 to 2016, there was a lot of momentum in this fan base. And with years of mediocrity to badness to frustration to boring irrelevancy from 2017 to 2021, basically, till that winter, till the Semien and Seager signings. I mean, this team made up a lot of that ground. I made up a lot of that frustration, just winning people back over to actually care about baseball in this market with the 2023 World Series run. They did. And I think it's important to think about that as an ownership group, about what you can do to inspire confidence in your team to get people to care about the Rangers. They're always going to be at least second fiddle to the Cowboys, no matter how frustrating or dumb or just mind-numbingly annoying watching that team is. They're always going to be second fiddle. And right now they're third fiddle behind the Mavericks in terms of just popularity in the area, even though they just won a championship. And they're maybe in danger of falling behind the Stars. Well, probably not. But still, you need to make up that ground so kids from this area for years and years to come are talking about how much they love the Rangers. They are lifelong fans. They are caring about your sports team. And if the Rangers are able to compete like normal, able to spend like normal, if they have given up on using that TV deal as a crutch, as an excuse, then that is a great, great sign for them. But here in this column from Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, talking about the Rangers and what they're going to do. He says the Rangers likely cannot spend big until they gain clarity on their future local media revenue, but that isn't stopping them from at least getting in the mix on some of the better free agent starting pitchers. Of course, they're talking with Eovaldi, and then he also mentions by name that they are talking with Max Fried, actually linking them. They're not just maybe the Rangers will be linked like Evan Grant was writing about on Friday. This is an actual link. They are talking. This is a report from a reporter saying, yep, Rangers talking to one of the best free agent pitchers on the market, even better than Eovaldi, will likely cost more in the long term. That one I think makes more sense if the Rangers want to get that kind of clarity on their long-term money, because Eovaldi, I think at the very most, is getting 3 years on his deal, whereas Max Fried is probably getting 6 years, at least getting 5, maybe getting 7, depending on how desperate people get after missing out on Juan Soto and missing out on other free agents. I don't think he's going to get 7 years, but it is a possibility. But one of the things that Chris Young talked about is that that starting pitching is always expensive on the free agent market, and the price never goes down. And the price has already been set, with multiple different free agent starting pitchers in their 30s getting 3-year deals. You had Kikuchi at $21 million a year. You had Luis Severino at $22.3 million a year for 3 years. Now, granted, there was an opt-out in Severino's deal where Kikuchi there wasn't, but I think Evo's better than both of these guys. I mean, Severino is younger, Kikuchi is a couple years younger, but none of them have the postseason pedigree that is going to make teams very in on Nathan Eovaldi. Also, The Baltimore Orioles are going to be very in on Eovaldi because apparently they don't like those starting pitchers that they might have to sign that would cost them a competitive balance pick. Guys who have the qualifying offer attached to them. Eovaldi doesn't have that. Not anymore. You can only get that once in your career, and Eovaldi does not have that. He also has the postseason pedigree. He also has that veteran oomph, the teaching, mentorship kind of qualities that the Rangers love about him. And as a young, inexperienced team with a couple of embarrassing playoff appearances the last couple years after great regular seasons, the Baltimore Orioles could really, really use a guy like Eovaldi. But again, I think that the Rangers just being in on Fried, I'm hoping that they don't let that kind of TV money nonsense ruin a chance to get what is a very, very good free agent. I really like Max Fried. I think he's not going to be too expensive in the average annual value. I think he could be a perfect fit for the Rangers in their window of contention, having a really darn good lefty as opposed to who has been a pretty darn good lefty in Cody Bradford. You have a little bit better version of him in Max Fried. I'm not sure that Bradford is ever going to have a second place Cy Young finish or multiple top 10 Cy Young finishes. It's theoretically possible, but probably not as likely. But adding a Max Fried to the top of your staff, having a lefty ace to pair alongside Jacob deGrom, especially if the Rangers somehow end up with Max Fried and Roki Sasaki this winter, I don't know how happy I will be. Actually, I do know. It will be incredibly happy. I will be over the moon. I will be losing my freaking mind if the Rangers can somehow pull off both those guys and adding some kind of a bat and finding a way to retool the bullpen, because that will still be an issue that the Rangers face heading into this next season. But the good thing about the Rangers is that they're not having to trade any of their players for financial flexibility. None of their homegrown stars are reaching that kind of arbitration age to where the Rangers might have to consider trading them for that financial flexibility. They still got some pre-arb guys, but there are some homegrown guys on the other team in Texas who are actually getting trade offers. Would the Astros consider trading two of their very good young lefties? We'll talk about that and why the Rangers should be talking to the Cubs about that potential bat to add to the lineup right after this. Now, it wouldn't be the winter meetings if there weren't some kind of reports dropping in the middle of my recording. This came out amidst my recording from Mark Feinsand of MLB.com. This was at 10:31 a.m. Central Time. The Angels appear to be close to trading an outfielder per source. Taylor Ward has been generating a lot of interest, so it would not be a surprise if it's him. Now, he was one of the guys who I talked about the Rangers possibly trading for when I did my Thursday episode last week about potential bats to trade for. Ward is a guy who I don't think is going to be very expensive in terms of trade capital to go out and get. He's only got 1 year under team control. He is a corner outfielder who is solid. He'll hit for pop. He's got a decent walk rate, and he's a right-handed bat who can mash against lefties, something that the Rangers need. It could also move Adolis Garcia into a full-time DH role. And while it would only be a 1 year stopgap solution, I think it could be a decent one if the Rangers think they're going to be priced out of what they would want to pay for Jock Peterson, who for me is the top option if the Rangers want to go get a bat in free agency. Either him or Randall Grichuk. I think both of those guys would be perfect. But speaking of trades, the Rangers might want to kick the tires on a Seiya Suzuki trade, or maybe even a Cody Bellinger trade, because a report last week from MLB Trade Rumors said that the Cubs are determined to trade at least one of those guys this offseason. Now, I think Bellinger is the more fascinating candidate because Bellinger plays center field and first base, which is just such a weird combination. He is such an interesting player, a guy who won an MVP, at such a young age and then fell off a cliff. Absolutely fell off a cliff, then signed such a weird deal in free agency. He's a two-time All-Star, made the All-Star team at 21 and 23, in at age 23 season 2019, an 8.6 WAR season with 47 home runs, won his MVP, finished top 10 in MVP voting last year after signing that weird 4-year deal with the Cubs with opt-outs after every year. He was just straight up non-tendered by the Dodgers heading into 2023 because he had been awful, legitimately awful for 3 years. Basically, right after that MVP year, just fell off a cliff. I mean, 2020, he was fine, not great, but 2021, 2022, he was one of the worst hitters in baseball. Then he had a really nice bounce back year with some weird StatCast data. I mean, he wasn't hitting the ball hard, but he was also hitting home runs. It was just, he was like a different hitter, and it didn't really make sense, and it didn't feel sustainable. So he didn't end up opting out of that deal. He took $25 million, or I think it was $27 million this year, and he has an opt-out for every other year in his contract. So if he has that kind of a great year, he can be gone. But when you look at some of his StatCast data, the bat speed is in the bottom 13th percentile. He wasn't striking out, which he was doing a whole lot when he was an MVP. You know, all of the expected numbers, the average exit velocity, barrel percentage, hard hit rate, launch angle, sweet spot, I mean, xWOBA, x batting average, all of those were in the bottom half of baseball, or in the bottom quarter of baseball even. But he wasn't swinging missing. He wasn't striking out. He had 18 home runs last year, 751 OPS. It was fine, but the main reason the Cubs are talking about trading him is that they don't need him to play center field every day. They've got Pete Crow Armstrong, who is one of the best defensive outfielders, one of the best defensive players in baseball. Now, can he hit? Who knows? But still, they don't need an everyday center fielder who is going to be very expensive. Now, do the Rangers need an everyday center fielder who's going to be very expensive? Maybe, maybe not. But this could be a guy who the Rangers put out there in right field. Maybe they put him in center field. But either way, I think the end goal of whatever bat the Rangers do add this offseason, which I think they do need to do, it needs to be with the end goal of putting Adolis Garcia as an everyday DH. Whether that's Bellinger in center field, Evan Carter in left field, and Wyatt Langford in right, or whether that's Evan in center, Wyatt in left, and Bellinger in right, whatever that combination ends up being, I think that is the way to go. Or maybe the Rangers trade for the other guy mentioned there, Seiya Suzuki, who I know the Rangers were at least kicking the tires on when he came over to the States in 2022. He has been low-key one of the better bats in baseball, more consistent bats in baseball, coming off of a 3.5 WAR season. Not a great defender out there in right field, but he hits the baseball very, very hard. He walks at a very good rate. Arm strength is very good. He's faster than you would think. He's got a couple more seasons left under contract. Not too terribly expensive. His age 30 and 31 seasons, 2025 and 2026 is when he's under contract. $17 million against the luxury tax, where it's $19 million a pop on the actual payroll, the checks that he is actually getting. So a little bit less against the luxury tax. That is nice. But for Bellinger, he's going to make $27.5 million this year. Then he has a player option with an opt-out for 2026 at $25 million. Then he hits free agency again in earnest at age 31. It's just such an interesting player. I don't know which one of these guys makes more sense for the Rangers in terms of what they would cost of trade capital. I think Suzuki would be more expensive because he's got 2 years under control. You're more sure that he is going to be a legitimately good bat, but the defensive value isn't there. But with Bellinger, he could have just 1 year, and he is making $27.5 million, and I'm not sure that he is going to really be worth that. And that would be a big chunk of getting the Rangers closer to the luxury tax, because the luxury tax is going to cost $26.66667 million on Bellinger for 2025. So that is significantly higher than the hit that Suzuki is going to bring. But I think the Rangers should at least be kicking the tires on those guys, because the Rangers need to add some offense to some big bats to their offense. I think Suzuki is one that I like more. But in terms of trade talks, not the Rangers, I think, will be involved in this, but the fact that we are getting reports this winter of the Astros listening to trade offers on Kyle Tucker, on Framber Valdez, as a certified hater of the Houston Astros, it is just an absolute delight to see these guys, who are both very, very good players, who have been big thorns in the side of the Texas Rangers for a long time. Kyle Tucker specifically, during the regular season, I should specify, because in that ALCS he didn't do much of anything, and the Rangers beat Framber Valdez both times in that ALCS with some delightful hitting, including some bombs from Jonah Heim, the Framber Bomber, and that weird bunt single from Robbie Grossman that I will remember for all time in Game 2 of that ALCS that really just sent things out of whack. But the Astros are listening to trade offers for Kyle Tucker. The Yankees are in at least talks, at least some offers with the Astros, and seeing them potentially fall off. I mean, their window is closing very, very rapidly, which is hilarious because they just signed a closer to $19 million a year for 5 seasons this past year. Their bullpen of death, allegedly, just looked terrible for the first couple months of the season. They are very actively shopping Ryan Presley, who was their setup man this past year. And so their bullpen of death will be, Josh Hader and Brian Abreu, who will hit free agency, I don't think after this year, maybe after next season. But their rotation is not nearly as deep as it once was. Their lineup is nowhere near as deep as it once was, and they might be losing Alex Bregman this offseason. So their lineup would be even less deep. They would have Jose Altuve, Yordan Alvarez, and Kyle Tucker, and then Yainer Diaz as a kind of dangerous semi-threat. And then if they lose Kyle Tucker out of that, heck, they might be starting to just do a full-on teardown, just full-on rebuild mode, back to the Disastros, back to the Lastros, which would be just absolutely delightful if the Rangers are winning World Series titles in that same kind of time span that Bruce Bochy did with the San Francisco Giants, which I don't think is necessarily a certainty, but sure would be very, very fun to watch the Rangers winning a bunch of titles while they are absolutely beating up on the Astros in a teardown. That's going to do it for today's show. Hopefully there will be some more rumblings and rumorings, and if there is some kind of last-minute emergency signing, I will be available all day to be hopping on the pod and talking about whatever's happening in these winter meetings. But until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.